Hey all, thanks for checking this video out. This video is about all or nothing thinking. I wanted to focus on it as one thing that I realized for myself that was not helpful and to work on that helped my anxiety and depression and my journey towards getting better, towards understanding myself, and towards not sabotaging my own efforts to get better. And I think it applies definitely to anxiety and depression and potentially to other mental wellness challenges. So the all or nothing thinking is basically it can apply in so many different areas of life, but an example is having a goal for yourself and thinking that if you don't attain that goal, that it wasn't worth it, or it's not even worth trying. That's one of the biggest, and for me was a really unhelpful mindset to have. So, for example, and especially when you're in a place that it seems like some of those goals might be getting further away or might be far away. I was in that position. And, the thought process that I would have for myself is, I'm never going to be able to, for example, live a healthy life for myself, like an independent life, or I'm never going to be able to progress in my career because of my anxiety and depression. And it boils down to specific examples sometimes of like, I'm never going to be able to speak in public without having a panic attack. That's an example. That's a very specific example. And that leads to thinking like, well, how am I going to hold the jobs that I want to hold where I might need to speak in front of people? Or how am I going to do even the productive hobbies and things that I want to do that might involve speaking in front of people? Or even lesser things, like when I was, my social anxiety gets really bad, of just talking in front of a few people can feel daunting. So the all or nothing thinking can kick in, and basically it stops me eventually from trying at all, because I'm like, if I can't speak in front of people and succeed, and that's part of it, is like, what does success mean? And framing that in my mind would be like, well, people think I was a good speaker and I was effective. All of that is part of the all or nothing thinking. And the part of the underlying point here is we're not perfect. No one is perfect. And we're all going to have our ups and downs. And the important part, though, is trying and learning. The all or nothing thinking, that's what it stops from happening, is from trying something, learning from it, trying again. Everything in life is practice. And I'm not taking away the fact that, people have specific struggles. Like, I will never remove the fact that I'm socially anxious. That was a fact for me. It's at some point, and it's still a fact for me, that I am socially anxious. But it doesn't really help me to sit and to just think, well, I'll never be XYZ. In a way, it turns into a self-fulfilling prophecy of, yeah, if you don't work at it at all, if you let that all or nothing thinking take over, you will absolutely never get anywhere near those fulfilling things. And there's so many different things that go into that. One of them is, I think, seeing only the good parts of other people's journeys. People are very good at, hiding the bad parts, or like, we don't like to talk about the work that goes into getting to some of these places, into becoming an effective speaker, into getting that job or that promotion that you want, into meeting new people, into making friends, into all of that. Yes, it can be easier for certain people who might, not have social anxiety. But the point is this: we all go through these efforts, and we all have to go through the process of, you try and it doesn't always work out. You regroup, you learn, you take lessons from trying, and then you try again. That's kind of how, to me, somebody living an efficient, productive life works. There's no way you're going to be able to avoid the failures. If you're really pushing for some of those goals, there's no way you're going to be able to avoid failure, unless you're just very, very, very lucky. There's a lot more that goes into this, like I said, which I won't dig too deeply into, but for example, the fear of rejection for me has always been a big thing that plays into this all or nothing, in that if I start to try, I could feel like those failures are rejection in some way, and they don't feel good. And that in itself can stop me from trying more. And I could just be using that as evidence that, oh, I'm never going to get there because I tried to speak in front of people and it didn't go the way I wanted it to go. Another thing to realize is oftentimes we're our own worst critics. If you ask people to evaluate you honestly, a lot of times we are our own harshest critics, and we will think we did a much worse job than we actually did. I've learned that through experience. So there's a lot that goes into it, but so how do we combat, or how do I, because this is just me sharing my experience. So how do I combat all or nothing thinking? I realize that I have to give myself some grace, that other people, as much as it seems that they were born with it, or that they have such an easier time, realistically, I realize that I just don't see the effort that's going into it. I don't see, I only see people's ups. I don't see a lot of their downs, just because that's naturally, people don't share those as much. So I can't also get into the comparison game. That's another part of getting into the comparison game of, this person does it so well, I'm never going to be able to do it as well as them. So avoiding the comparison game, knowing that I'm doing a good thing for myself by just trying to do what I can, and trying to learn and trying to grow. And starting out is the hardest part. So in the all or nothing thinking, what helps is, in the beginning, you kind of have to, if you're really deep into that all or nothing thinking, you really just have to fight against it and just get started. For example, with the public speaking, find opportunities for you to go out there and speak in environments that you're a little bit more comfortable in. It doesn't have to be a crowd of 100, 200 people, but the point is this: there needs to be a little discomfort. Otherwise, you're not gonna grow. For example, with running, I never thought I would be a decent runner, and eventually I ended up running half marathons. And still to this day, I end up, if I take a break from running and I get back to it, I'm like, this is really tough. I don't know if I'm ever going to get to the places that I want, like running a mile in this amount of time, or getting started is the hardest part. Getting started and working against that friction of the all or nothing thinking is the hardest part. And I don't know if there's any easy way around that. I think you just have to kind of face it and be like, you're going to be uncomfortable. It's not going to feel like it's paying off for a while, probably, for most of these things. And that's another part of this point is, unfortunately, there's no instant answers. There's no instant gratification for a lot of this stuff. But along the journey, if you really pay attention to yourself and don't play the comparison game, that can be a helpful tool of, you know, for example, I went on this one run and the next run I was a little bit faster. I didn't feel as tired. Instead of being like, well, this person's already, you know, running at the pace that I want to, I'm never going to get there, and having your mind go into those negative feedback loops. So focusing on yourself, being compassionate with yourself, knowing that it's going to be hard to start out. It's going to be really hard. But putting that effort in the beginning, I've been there in many different ways of, it can be hard, it can feel lonely, it can feel like you're not getting anywhere and you're spinning your wheels, but in my experience, the times I put that effort in, it has paid off. It has paid off to stick it out. And after a while, you start to realize the all or nothing thinking isn't 100% reflective of reality, you know? The all or nothing thinking of like, I will never be a good speaker starts to go away when you realize, like, you do some practice, or the all or nothing thinking of like, I'll never be a good runner starts to go away eventually when you hit your goal of running a half marathon. And I think certain people's minds can be prone to that judgment. I still am. That's how my mind works. Even after accomplishing a lot of these things, my mind will still, when I try and start back up again some of these efforts, my mind will go into all or nothing thinking, and I have to fight against it. But I know from my past experience that it works. I just have to stick with it and put the effort in, and that the point is not going to be comfortable, but there are ways to balance the discomfort and not just throw yourself into, I'm going to go from, not running one day to running a marathon, a half marathon or marathon the next. So yeah, it's tough, the all or nothing thinking, but there are strategies to work against it. And the reason I started with this, focusing on this one thing, is I think it's one of the biggest things that has held me back, especially when I was in a really bad place, because it stops you from even trying. It stops you from trying anything when you're in that place of like, I'm never going to get there. You can make progress one small step at a time. It's going to take effort, but I've lived it. So yeah, hopefully this can be helpful to other people. Please feel free to comment if this is something you've experienced or you've found ways through, you can relate to in any way. Please, happy to hear you share your story, your experience. This is about sharing people's experiences and learning from each other. So thanks for watching. Be well. Talk soon.